Welcome to Echo Tales, where the whispers of the past refuse to be silenced, and the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface. Tonight, we delve into a story of betrayal so profound, it redefines the very meaning of a broken vow. A man's life, meticulously unraveled, only to be woven anew from the threads of a shocking revelation. My story began not with a bang, but with a relentless, jarring clang. The doorbell screamed, an impatient, urgent demand, not the gentle chime of an arriving guest. I stumbled to the front door, still in the disheveled comfort of pajama pants, a slice of burnt toast clutched in my hand like a shield. Outside, framed by the nascent dawn, stood my wife, Darla. Clad in a scarlet silk gown, mascara smudged like war paint under her eyes, her voice, sharp and trembling with an almost feral adrenaline, cut through the quiet morning. "I forgot my backup heels," she snapped. Not a greeting, not a flicker of acknowledgement, just a dismissive shove as she swept past me. Perfume and panic, a volatile cocktail that had become the scent of our mornings. This was the fourth time this week she'd forgotten something, barging back and while primping for galas, corporate soirees, and weekend brunches, events to which I was never invited. But the facade was crumbling. The night before, a friend from one of those brunches had posted a group photo. Darla wasn't in it. I didn't confront her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply watched. That night, a text. "Come to the Crestview Ballroom at 8. I have a surprise for you." Surprise? The word felt alien, a relic from a life long gone. She hadn't surprised me since 2017, when it was a chocolate cake and a handwritten note that had brought me to tears for 3 days. This time, I anticipated nothing sweet, only the bitter taste of answers. I arrived in a wrinkled button-down, my old shoes scuffed, a silent testament to the years of quiet neglect. I wanted her to see what I had become, what her indifference had wrought. The ballroom pulsed with a vibrant, cruel energy. Laughter boomed like distant thunder. Spotlights danced across clinking champagne flutes, illuminating a world that had long excluded me. And there she was, radiant on stage, microphone in hand. "Before we move on," she announced, her eyes, unnervingly, found mine, pinning me in place. "I have to say something personal, something important." She called my name. The crowd turned as one, 1,000 curious gazes dissecting me. I felt like a defendant walking into a public trial. "I've given my everything," she declared loudly, her voice echoing with a rehearsed sincerity. "But not to me, to them. But sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes one person has to carry all the weight while the other just watches from the sidelines." Gasps rippled through the audience, punctuated by awkward, nervous chuckles. I stood frozen, a statue of quiet despair. Then she delivered the final blow, a theatrical flourish perfectly orchestrated. "I'm giving him a choice right now, in front of all of you. Stay and listen or walk away." The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. A whisper from a coworker reached me. She actually did it. I looked at Darla, this polished, ruthless stranger, and in that moment, an unnerving clarity descended. No grand speech, no dramatic confrontation. I simply reached into my pocket, retrieved my keys, and let them jingle, a small defiant symphony as I turned to leave. 1 step, 2 steps. She didn't call my name. 3 steps. Her gaze didn't waver. 4 steps. A faint smile touched her lips. 5 steps. I opened the heavy ballroom doors and vanished from her life, from the camera crews, from the hollow applause. But that was merely the overture, because what I unearthed after stepping through that door made her regret ever giving me that choice. I didn't drive home. I didn't even know where I was going. The keys still warm in my hand, I walked, the city's ceaseless hum swallowing my fractured thoughts. Somewhere between the glittering ballroom and the desolate side street where I finally collapsed onto a cold bench, the realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. Every word, every gesture had been meticulously rehearsed. She hadn't just wanted to end things. She'd craved my humiliation. A stage, an audience, a pristine narrative painting her as the resilient martyr who had tried everything. And I was meant to be the spineless husband, incapable of keeping pace with her ambition. But here's the grim truth about pushing someone too far. Eventually, they stop bending. They break, but they break quietly. And when that happens, they start truly paying attention. Sleep was a forgotten luxury. I sat on that bench until the sun, a pale, indifferent eye, crept above the horizon. My phone buzzed 5 times. For word from event attendees, offering platitudes about the awkwardness or her bravery. The 5th, a number I didn't recognize. You don't know me, but you need to see this. She's not who you think she is. Attached, a short video. My hands trembled, as if I just clawed my way out of wreckage. I tapped play. It was Darla. The same crimson gown, the same practice smile. But this wasn't the gala. This was hours earlier, backstage in the green room. She was with him, the tall, perfectly postured man from her firm, his jawline smug, his hands possessively on her waist. Her whispered words, chillingly clear. Are you sure he'll walk? He grinned, a predator's smile. If not, we'll push him. A wave of nausea washed over me, a gut-wrenching realization. This wasn't about falling out of love. This was a calculated setup, a performance designed to orchestrate my exit. They wanted me gone, a clean break. No messy divorce, no splitting of assets. Just me walking off stage so they could rewrite the entire script. And I, the unsuspecting fool, had played my part perfectly. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to demand answers about how long this elaborate charade had been in motion. But instead, I saved the video. For once, I would not argue. I would not beg. I would not allow her to turn this into another stage show. I would wait. I would watch. I would let her believe she had won. And then I would reclaim everything, one meticulously exposed piece at a time. But the next morning, a new twist emerged, something I hadn't foreseen, something that spiraled everything into far more complicated and dangerous territory. The next morning felt like a nightmare lingering in the harsh light of day. My eyes burned. Muscles ached from a sleepless night on a park bench. Home. The word itself fell hollow, a concept I no longer owned. It hadn't been ours for months, a truth I had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. What was once shared had been systematically repossessed by Darla, piece by piece, through subtle, insidious shifts. The altered tone, the locked drawers, the endless array of events to which I was conspicuously absent. But now I had proof, and with proof came an agonizing clarity. I found myself outside Felix's apartment, my oldest friend, with whom I hadn't truly connected in almost a year. Since he'd moved in with his girlfriend, our late-night gaming marathons and cheap whiskey confessions had faded into memory. Yet, I had nowhere else to go. I knew if I didn't knock, I would simply disintegrate in the hallway. He let me in without a single question, though the unspoken pity in his eyes was a language all its own. I gave him the terse, brutal version, the ballroom, the public execution, the chilling video. He didn't offer the "I told you," so he was surely entitled to. Instead, he just handed me a steaming cup of coffee and, with a gravitas I hadn't seen in him for years, said, "Whatever she's planning, you need to get ahead of it." Then, the doorbell rang. I froze. Too early for deliveries, too random for mere coincidence. Felix opened the door while I hovered, a ghost behind his shoulder. A courier stood there, holding a large white envelope addressed to me, conspicuously lacking a return address. My hand trembled as I signed, then slowly, agonizingly, tore it open. The blood drained from my face. Inside were 2 stark pieces of evidence, a printed photograph and a typed letter. The photo showed Darla, draped in the arms of the same man from the video, his arm tight around her waist as she leaned into him, kissing his neck. The timestamp, undeniable and brutal, confirmed it wasn't recent. 6 months ago. 6 months. The letter was cold, clinical, and utterly devastating. Since you've chosen to walk away, I'm assuming you understand what that means. I've already spoken to my attorney. You'll be receiving divorce papers soon. I suggest you cooperate quietly. I'm keeping the house, of course. There's no point in dragging this through the courts. Let's just make this simple. Darla, make this simple. She wanted to erase me. That was the core of it all. Public humiliation, calculated legal maneuvers, an emotional ambush. Not closure. Oh no, she wanted to rewrite our entire marriage, paint it as her mistake, her burden. And if I played my part, I'd vanish, remembered as the bitter, forgettable man who couldn't handle her dazzling ambition. I sat in stunned silence, holding that letter as if it were soaked in venom. It was then that Felix, my friend, ignited a spark of defiance I thought long extinguished. "She thinks you're done," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "That's why she's rushing. Because if you disappear quietly, she wins." I didn't crave revenge, not in the destructive way she did. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted the truth to matter again. I wanted myself to matter. And the first step was to dig deeper. If she was capable of such easy lies, what else was she hiding? What I found next didn't just shock me. It forced me to question if I had ever truly known the woman I married at all. I spent the remainder of that day pacing Felix's cramped apartment, a caged animal in borrowed skin. The photo, the letter, the public spectacle at the gala, it all coalesced into a single, horrifying truth. Darla had meticulously planned my erasure for months, and I had, like a sleepwalker, stumbled directly into her trap. But betrayal, once it cracks open, is a relentless thing. Everything begins to leak. I couldn't shake the unsettling intuition that what I had seen was merely the glinting surface of a much deeper scheme. Her letter had sounded so definitive, so completely mapped out. House, divorce terms, even a narrative. But one phrase, "let's just make this simple," echoed in my mind a discordant note. In 10 years of marriage, she had never uttered those words. They didn't sound like her. They sounded rehearsed, a calculated line meant to intimidate, to keep me quiet, passive, precisely the way I had allowed myself to be for years. So I decided the passivity ended now. Felix, ever practical, helped me start our excavation with an old iPad. Darla had forgotten I still had access to an older model we once shared for calendars and bills. She hadn't touched it in over a year. I'd mindlessly grabbed it during my hasty departure, buried in a drawer of my nightstand, not even remembering I'd packed it. Yet, it still held the ghost of her synced emails, her cloud backup, her photo archive. Within minutes, a deluge of images and data, dozens of things I desperately wished I could unsee, spilled onto the screen. Recurring calendar invites, innocently labeled boardroom briefings, but consistently scheduled at obscure hotels. Always the same time, 7 p.m. on weekdays. No attachments, no meeting links, just vague titles and addresses. I cross-referenced. Each time, the same man, Darla's lover, appeared in photos stored on her phone, cunningly tucked into folders disguised with innocuous names like grocery lists or workout plan. These folders contained selfies, intimate videos, location pings, some months old, some shockingly recent. Some taken while I was texting her, asking if she was okay when she claimed to be working late. She hadn't just moved on. She had systematically replaced me, turning me into a mere placeholder while she meticulously constructed an entirely different life in the shadows. Her growing silence, her icy distance, the way she would stare at her phone, a private smile playing on her lips when she thought I wasn't watching. It had all been her long, drawn-out goodbye, a farewell I was too blind to recognize until now. But it wasn't just the affair. That, in its own twisted way, would have been almost easier to comprehend. It was the way she documented everything, like a meticulous archivist building a case, not a lover creating memories. Felix leaned over my shoulder as we scrolled through her emails, his voice grim. "This isn't just cheating, man. This looks like planning." And then, the final gut punch confirmation. An email dated 6 weeks before the gala. Subject, timeline for transition. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from her job. It was from a real estate agent. She was already in the advanced stages of buying a condo, solely in her name. And in the thread, a casual mention. The divorce will be handled cleanly. He won't fight back. She wrote that about me, like I was a predictable variable, an obstacle that would simply fold. I sat there, stunned, a raw, unfamiliar rage clawing at my throat. Not because she wanted to leave, but because she had crafted this illusion with such insidious precision that I hadn't even known I was already gone. But the biggest twist, the most devastating deception, was yet to come. Because when I checked her sent messages, I found something meant for someone else, sent the very night I walked out of the gala. Something that proved this wasn't just about me. It was about someone I trusted implicitly, someone who had been in on it from the very start. There's a precise moment when betrayal stops being an emotional wound and transforms into a tactical strike. That was the profound, chilling shift I felt as I stared at the screen, scrolling through Darla's sent emails, trying desperately to fathom the dizzying depth of her scheme. For days, I had believed myself a heartbroken husband, merely uncovering an affair. But the truth was infinitely darker, meticulously coordinated, and it entangled someone I never, in my wildest nightmares, would have suspected. The message, stamped 11:17 p.m., just hours after I had walked out of the ballroom, bore the subject line, Phase 2. The words alone sent a tremor of ice through me. But it was the recipient that made my blood run cold. Felix. My Felix. The same Felix who had handed me coffee as my world crumbled, who had offered his couch, who had sagely advised, whatever she's planning, you need to get ahead of it. I had clung to him as my last ally, my final anchor in a storm of deceit. But the email, stark and brutal, told a different story. He walked, just like he said he would. Do not mention anything about the condo yet. I'll handle the paperwork this week. If he asks questions, just play dumb. Also, make sure he doesn't check the iPad. He might still have access, and that will complicate things. Let's keep this clean. I'll talk to the lawyer again Monday. I couldn't breathe. The air in my lungs felt like needles. I stared across the room at Felix, who was casually heating leftovers, humming, oblivious, chattering about a movie he wanted to watch later. Was it all a performance? Every sympathetic word, every I got you, man. Was he merely managing me on her behalf? I snapped the iPad shut. He turned, a casual question on his lips. You okay? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection. My face, hollowed by shock and exhaustion, no longer looked familiar. I wasn't just the abandoned husband or the betrayed friend. I was a mark, a soft, oblivious pawn in someone else's meticulously crafted game. But in that moment, the pain transmuted. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. And I was finally, irrevocably awake. I waited until after midnight. I lay on that lumpy couch, feigning sleep, listening to Felix's even breathing, the low hum of the fridge, an occasional cough. Then, silently, I slipped out the iPad and the damning envelope secured in my bag. I took nothing else. I didn't need a confrontation yet. What I needed was leverage, and I knew precisely who to call. There was one person Darla had always fundamentally underestimated, her sister, Nora. They were estranged, constantly clashing over values, money, and Nora's unyielding refusal to engage in social niceties. But Nora, she had always seen me, respected me, often muttering that I was too good for Darla. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, but a memory, sharp and clear, surfaced from one of our Thanksgiving skirmishes. If she ever crosses a line you can't live with, Nora had said, her eyes piercing, call me. I'll help you burn the bridge behind you. I dismissed it as a bitter jest. It wasn't. I messaged her. Her reply arrived in 2 minutes. Come over. I've been waiting for this day. Nora lived in an apartment that mirrored her soul. Sharp, uncluttered, brutally honest. Nothing about it pretended to be more than it was. The last time I'd seen her was at a Christmas dinner where Darla arrived 2 hours late, barely making eye contact. Nora had noticed everything even then, but she never pushed. She just poured me an extra glass of wine and said, You deserve better than a woman who treats you like an afterthought. Now, I stood at her door, a bag heavy with betrayal, a heart that no longer felt like my own. She didn't offer a hug. She opened the door, nodded once, and her voice, devoid of surprise, simply said, Took you long enough. I stepped inside. No questions. She just pointed to the kitchen table, and I laid everything out, the letter, the photo, the damning email from Darla to Felix. I recounted the iPad's grim secrets, the videos, the fake meetings, Darla's covert real estate deal. I held nothing back. I expected a bitter "I told you so," or a smug "I knew she'd do this." Instead, Nora said, her voice chillingly calm, "That's not even the half of it." She disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a small, unassuming wooden box. Inside lay printed screenshots, old text logs, even a flash drive. She slid it across the table toward me, as if it were a primed grenade. "I kept tabs after she started pulling away from the family," she explained quietly. "You weren't the only one she ghosted. She stopped coming to our mom's doctor appointments, ignored calls from our aunt when she was in hospice. And when I called her out, she blamed you. Said you were emotionally stifling her, that you wouldn't let her grow. Said she had to cut toxic ties to become her best self. The lie made me feel physically ill." Nora continued, "She lied to everyone, not just about the affair, but about her job, her finances, even her past. And the guy she's with, that's not his first married woman. He does this, gets in deep, helps them start fresh, then moves on after they've torched their old lives." I was reeling, my head swimming. "So she's just what? A puppet?" Nora shook her head, a cold glint in her eyes. "No, she's the one holding the scissors. He's just her excuse." She showed me a screenshot from months earlier, an email Darla had accidentally forwarded to a mutual contact. It was a draft of a prenup, a new one, meant for someone else. She wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing to replace me in every role I held: husband, partner, even family. I was being erased, rewritten out of my own story. "But you weren't the only one being erased." Nora leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "Do you remember Aunt Meredith's inheritance?" I nodded slowly, remembering the substantial sum Darla had always insisted never came through. She lied. It did. You were both listed as joint beneficiaries, but Darla accepted the money alone. Signed off without telling you. She forged your part. Nora's words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I found out 6 months ago, but I couldn't prove it. Until now. That was it. That was the precise moment something inside me snapped. Not in rage, but in a cold, unshakable purpose. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was calculated theft, systemic manipulation, outright fraud. She had been constructing a new version of herself, one that demanded my silent, humiliated disappearance so she could step into her next life untouched. But she had gravely miscalculated. She thought I would simply stay silent. I met Nora's calm, unwavering gaze. "We bring her down?" she asked. "No," I replied, the word firm, resolute. "We bring out the truth." 2 days later, I walked into the understated office of Clarissa Bell. If Darla had a reputation for meticulously crafting illusions, Clarissa had one for brutally tearing them apart. She was a forensic financial investigator, sharp as broken glass, and twice as dangerous when pointed in the right direction. Nora, who had worked with her during a friend's brutal custody battle, assured me Clarissa possessed an uncanny knack for unearthing secrets people desperately wished to keep buried. I handed her the flash drive, the intricate email trail, and a copy of the inheritance paperwork Nora had painstakingly dug up. Clarissa reviewed it all, her expression unreadable, barely a blink. "She's sloppy," she stated flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "She assumed that because you are quiet, you would be compliant. But I've seen this countless times. People who control through chaos often mistake silence for weakness. What it actually means is that we're collecting every piece of evidence while they run their mouths." Our plan was deceptively simple. Don't fight Darla on her terms. No yelling, no emotional breakdowns, just cold, calculated exposure. Timing would be everything. Clarissa immediately drafted a legal freeze on all shared accounts, backed by irrefutable evidence of financial fraud concerning the inheritance. We filed for an injunction on the condo purchase, citing spousal deception and the concealed transactions that had been in motion long before our separation was even declared. Within 72 hours, Darla's meticulously constructed deal began to collapse. She didn't know it yet, but she would. Meanwhile, I ghosted Felix. He called twice, his name flashing accusingly on my screen. I didn't answer. Then came a text. I didn't have a choice, man. She promised to clear my debt. I didn't reply. Let him sweat. Let him wonder precisely how much I knew and how far I was willing to go. Then, after nearly a week of agonizing silence, Darla finally reached out. A text message, as if nothing had happened. Hey, hope you're doing okay. Can we meet up and talk like adults? No drama, just closure. Closure. That word again. The same word she had used to justify her stage humiliation at the gala. The same word that had likely been uttered to justify emptying our joint account before I could even react. I agreed to the meeting, but I chose the location, a quiet restaurant she despised, one she'd once dismissed as too plain, too honest. Perfect. She walked in, looking utterly untouched, not a hair out of place, draped in an expensive coat, her smile practiced and fake, her voice soft, saccharine. You look well, she said, as if I were some casual acquaintance from a forgotten past. I merely nodded, refusing to speak. She launched into a rehearsed monologue, lamenting how messy things had become, but assuring me we could still walk away clean. She had already spoken with her lawyer. She chirped and had prepared something fair. I placed a folder on the table. Her gaze dropped. Her smile froze, then slowly, terrifyingly, it began to crack. Inside lay a summary of Clarissa's findings. The bank freeze order, the halted condo transaction, and a detailed statement outlining her forged signature on the inheritance acceptance. Her fingers trembled, barely perceptible, as she slowly closed the folder. You don't want to do this, she whispered, the composure finally shattering. No, I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. I didn't, but you did. The silence between us was suffocating, heavy with unspoken truths. For the first time, I saw it in her eyes, fear. Not guilt, not regret, but pure, unadulterated, stunned fear. Because for the first time, she could not control the story. I wasn't walking away quietly. I was walking through the fire she had lit, and I was bringing the truth with me. I'll be in touch, I said, rising from the table, with my lawyer. And then I left her sitting there, alone, surrounded by the wreckage of plans that had suddenly, irrevocably collapsed, just as she had once left me. The legal battle wasn't brief, but it was ultimately clear-cut. Once Clarissa's undeniable evidence hit the courtroom, the judge needed no convincing. The condo deal was blocked, later sold off, its proceeds rightfully divided. The inheritance was reopened for investigation. Darla compelled to return half, plus damages for the fraud. Felix, he simply vanished from both our lives after receiving a subpoena he never saw coming. And Darla? She tried to play the victim in court, but by the second hearing, even her own lawyer looked weary of her theatrical lies. The silence that followed was the sweetest victory of all. No more stage drama, no more insidious gaslighting, no more walking on eggshells in my own home. I moved into a small, unassuming cottage just outside town, nestled by a tranquil lake I hadn't even known existed until Nora found the listing. She helped me paint the porch, plant tomatoes in the backyard. Sometimes she still swings by on weekends, bringing pie, a quiet reminder that not all ties are meant to be severed. Some are just waiting to be honored. I don't know if I'll ever fall in love again. That's no longer the point. The point is, I'm no longer the man who lets someone else write the story of his life. I'm the one holding the pen now. And Darla, she faded. The same way every mask eventually slips when there's no longer an audience left to impress. So, if you're listening, if someone once stood before you and delivered a public ultimatum, hoping you would shrink, hoping you would quietly disappear, remember this. You are allowed to walk away. Not in shame, but in strength. This isn't just my story. It's an echo of countless untold narratives. What profound betrayals or quiet acts of defiance have reshaped your understanding of truth? What hidden currents lurk beneath the surface of the lives we think we know? Share your thoughts, your experiences, your own echoes of resilience in the comments below. And if this tale resonated with the depths of your own experience, be sure to subscribe to Echo Tales, where the deepest secrets are brought into the light, and every shattered silence eventually finds its voice.